Hi, welcome to NWOBHM Guitar Tuition. So we've got a real special classic album inspection today, a true classic, released 40 years ago today, March the 22nd, 1982. It's Iron Maiden's third album, Number of the Beast. This is a game changer, not only for Maiden, but a game changer for heavy metal itself. This is what I'd call an access album. And what I mean by that is it's someone's getting turned on to rock music or metal, and this might be one of the first albums they buy to kind of try metal out or something like that. Examples in the past, before we knew what heavy metal was, would maybe being Rocked by Machine Head, or certainly Paranoid by Black Sabbath. Then you'd have a bit of a gap, and I think British Steel by Judas Priest would fall into that category, possibly Motorhead's Ace of Spades album. So I mentioned Number of the Beast. I think after that, an album like Master of Puppets like Metallica as well. So these are big selling albums, but they're not as big as those breakout albums like, say, Paramania by Def Leppard, or the Black Album by Metallica, or Appetite for Destruction, or Back in Black. Those would be typically rock albums, metal, hard rock albums that people who don't like rock or metal would have in their collection. Now, checking certifications on this, it sold 2 million copies, but I've read some it sold as much as 9 worldwide. If you think with reissues and how popular Maiden are all over the world, that could be possible. But I'm not sure on exact figures. But it was gold in America, and then it got declared platinum in 1986. Okay, so when this album appears, Maiden have done 2 albums. Number 4, they got 2 in the UK charts with the debut album, the classic Iron Maiden. And the second album, Killers, made number 12. Not quite as high up there, but it did something different, the Killers album, and kind of established that Maiden could stretch out the sound. But I think the main thing those albums establish is one key thing. I think this is why Maiden have survived for so long. At the top of that album cover, it's got that red Iron Maiden logo on the first album. You've got Eddie, which is a piece of art that they've just bought to use off Derek Riggs, and then the Eddie thing stuck, and then that's been adapted to Killers. Again, it has that red logo across the top. And Number of the Beast the same. And then the artwork kind of, although I prefer the Killers artwork, it took a kind of step up with Number of the Beast. It's a more detailed illustration by Derek Riggs, and this is something the band would do. The album afterwards, Peace of Mind, also has the Iron Maiden logo in red right across the top. And you just know what you're buying, you know what you're getting. So the other key thing here is Paul Di'Anno has left the band. I don't know whether he's pushed or shoved or whether he just went. It just wasn't working out for him. Paul Di'Anno, really good singer, but someone probably psychologically not totally geared up for the rigours of trying to break a band internationally and those kind of touring pressures. So normally bringing another singer in could have damaged things for Maiden, but they got Bruce, later Bruce Dickinson from Samson, and obviously he was able to make the sound more melodic, and he's kind of the Ian Gillan elect. He's one of the great metal singers, one of the great frontmen as well, an athletic frontman who could take Maiden into arenas and do the thing where they say, can the person at the back feel that they're seeing your performance? So Bruce joined, and on this album they'd using Martin Birch again, so that relationship was solidifying. And Adrian Smith was on his second album with them, and he would come to the fore more with writing. He co-writes 3 on this album, and his guitar solo. So it all comes together for Maiden on this one. The other thing with it is timing's everything in music. If Maiden released this album in the summer, they would have been competing with Screaming for Vengeance by Judas Priest, which is a great record. A few weeks later, Scorpions released, a week later, Scorpions released Blackout as well. But I think Motorhead as well, they didn't release their Iron Fist album until April the next month in 82. And they kind of peaked with No Sleep Till Hammersmith in 81. So Maiden's just in this little pocket where maybe people are like, I really want to get a heavy metal album. What's out? And probably that month, or certainly that week and the weeks preceding that, this was probably the release. A great branding, great marketing on this. And of course they had a hit single, number 7 with Run to the Hills. Up to that point, that was probably, I would argue, probably the heaviest, the highest a heavy song had got. And I think the other thing with Run to the Hills is it doesn't compromise Maiden's sound. I love Living After Midnight and Breaking the Law, but they're not typical Judas Priest songs. Paranoid's not a typical Black Sabbath song, whereas you couldn't say Run the Hills isn't a typical Maiden song. It's got an Amphetamine chorus, it's got the gallop, it's got a guitar solo. It doesn't sort of sacrifice anything. It doesn't sort of go another way or offer a different version or take on Iron Maiden. It's quite a classic thing. So from that point there, like Maiden, positioned themselves for this album to do what it did. But what are the tracks on it? So the opening, it's weird. I've been listening to this album a few times in the last few days, and it's just weird, the running order, because it starts with a filler cut, which is actually pretty enjoyable. Invaders, so it's pretty frantic. 3 minutes 23. There's a great intro with great Steve Harris bass. I think you can hear on this, Harry's got his bass sound balanced really well. It hasn't got the sort of distortion of the Killers. It's got that Harry clank, but it's not too intrusive. It's got a nice blend with the guitars, and that's something I noticed listening on the record. But yeah, it's weird. I mean, looking at the album now, I would switch and start with Number of the Beast. Side 2 of the album that opens with Number of the Beast. If you had Number of the Beast opening the album with that speech, that would be great. And then Invaders could switch to side 2. Quite strange. So I like the track Invaders, it's really good, but it feels like a cut that should be the 6 or 7 track or something. But that's the opening one. It's a catchy track. It's frantic. It's not a classic, but it's a good tune. But like I said, unusual opener. Then probably maybe one of the album's best cuts for number 2, right up there, Children of the Damned. So I describe this as a secondary classic. It's a track that Play Live and Maiden fans love, but it's not one of the holy 3, which are Run to the Hills, Hella Be the Name, and the title track. This 4 minutes 36, it goes on quite a journey, this, so you'd kind of think the song was longer in a way. But it's really epic, great vocal from Bruce. And there's a cool two-handed tapping solo, which I'm guessing Smithy, but it sounds like it might be harmonised, so I don't know whether Dave Murray got involved with that. The other thing is it has a trademark tempo change from Maiden, so it's got the slow power ballad feel, which would be beloved by a band like Metallica, and then it picks up. It's a great second track. Then track number 3 is another track off the album. I think this is like the album's like really great deep cut, and it's The Prisoner. I think this is co-written with Adrian Smith. And what you notice about this is the bridge section is really quite unusual. It's not like a typical Maiden bridge, but it's really well written, which makes me think it's Smithy. And then it has this really upbeat chorus. So like Run to the Hills, it's got a major key chorus. And it's very catchy, really good. It starts off with that drum, the speech of Patrick McGowan and number 2 from The Prisoner. Apparently Rod Smallwood rung McGowan and he said, look, we want to use your thing. He said, describe your music or something like that. And he said, oh, we're a rock band. A rock band, you say? And he just said, do it. Which you can imagine if Patrick McGowan says that, you would, wouldn't you? Brilliant. A great, great idea by Maiden, and Bruce actually touching bass with someone like The Prisoner, which is a really cool TV show. Interestingly enough, Bruce doesn't get any co-writing credits on this album because he had publishing issues from his contractual time with Samson. But he said morally he should have had some, and I suspect he's maybe something to do with this. Clive Burr actually gets a couple of co-writing credits. Yeah, it's a great track, The Prisoner. Really good lead break on this, one of the best. It's got a classic Smithy solo. So on this album, you can hear Smith and Murray, the difference between the playing, Smithy's slow, wide vibrato. Dave Murray's quite interesting. He's not kind of trilling as much. I think his solos, he's using a bit of kind of wah-wah as well. I think his solos are better crafted here, like in some ways, Dave Murray. He gives a good performance. It's almost like him and Smithy are trying to work off each other really well. So that's a great track. Definitely one of the album's top cuts. And then 22 Acacia Avenue. I think this is the lyrical sequel to Charlotte the Harlot. I like this track again. It's got the tempo change within it. Changes groove. I don't like it as much as the previous tracks. What's the lyric about getting something paying 50 quid? Seems quite expensive for the time, but anyway, I wouldn't know. Yeah, it's a cool tune. Side 2 of the album opens with the title track. I should just say the album's 39 minutes 11 seconds, so like a lot of albums, I always say this when I'm doing these, like a lot of albums from that time, it's under 40 minutes, it blasts through, it's not like albums now. So Number of the Beast form is 52. Obviously this is one of the staple classic Maiden tracks. Again, it's using the opening is kind of using a Mixolydian type sound on the bass, majory Mixolydian, and then it moves down a tone. But again, it's that kind of happy thing that Maiden are doing with the sound on this, with those catchy choruses like on Run to the Hills and The Prisoner. And again, this track's got a pretty catchy chorus as well. And again, that Mixolydian mode sound. So again, you sort of think Maiden are going to be kind of dark and dungeonistic. But they're not really. They've got a more upbeat commerciality to their tunes at times, and that's why they're a success. So this is a good trade-off solo, and this Dave Maurice's Wah Wah and his break, and Smithy takes over. Really cool metal scream by Bruce at the start as well. He doesn't do many metal screams, Bruce, but when he does them, they're top. I think, I've probably heard this track too many times, like Run to the Hills, which is the next track. There's not much I can say about that track. But if you just shut your eyes and listen to it, it's a really well-crafted song. Really good intro with the drums. A lot of imagination there. Obviously, the ubiquitous gallop. And a cool Dave Murray solo. Gets his trills out on this. Then you come to track 7, which is like probably the filler cut, Gangland. Again, I quite like this. I probably prefer Invaders as the other filler cut. Where this is positioned in the album is where you would expect a track like this. A fillery sort of deep cut. So Smithy writes this with Clive Burr. They jammed it out. Quite a cool chorus, but I noticed that listening to the riffing on this, he's using the 2-note shapes on the D and G, those dyads, and it's quite Def Leppard-ish, actually, if you listen to the kind of shapes that Def Leppard use on the High and Dry album. I think Smithy might have been linked with that gig at one point. So the Adrian Smith stuff, it can have a different sound to it, and that adds another flavour to the mix of Maiden. To just mention on the remaster, not the most recent one, the one before, it's an inserted Total Eclipse, which I think's a Smithy track. That's a cool song. Might have made a better choice for the album, but that was the B-side, I think, of Run to the Hills. And the final track is Hallowed Be the Name, a track that needs no introduction. When I was listening to this again, obviously it's epic, it builds, it shows all the hallmarks of the band. I mean, it's got that clean intro with the bass, with the bells as well, and Bruce starts singing fairly straight away, but now Maiden tend to do longer bass or clean guitar intros for their tracks, and that's become something of a trademark. But this is one of the tracks where that starts, I think, really. And it's something that can get the crowd going. And I think it's quite interesting with this track. It's kind of a big anthem for the band, but it is an epic. So again, the band's not compromising. It's not like it's the kind of 3-minute, 4-minute hit. It is an album track, but it's still a staple of the band's set. And the types of guitar figures they're using on this are very popular with power metal bands and, trad metal moving forward. When I first heard this album, I was just thinking back to Run to the Hills. We had the single on picture disc, and it was pretty exciting having Maiden in the top 10. When we got the album, my brother bought it. I mean, we liked it. I remember listening to it quite a bit, but we kind of went off Maiden, I've got to confess. They kind of got really popular, and I think we preferred the Di'Anno sound. And I still do in some ways. But coming back to this album now, I don't think it's the best Maiden album, but it's the one that breaks them. It's the one that's got the elements in it that define the Iron Maiden sound, and the cover as well, and the branding and so on. I think a lesson for any band is get your logo sorted straight away, because Maiden's competitors prior to this didn't have the branding sorted. They changed logo on albums, like for instance Van Halen had a great logo, but they changed the logo on Women and Children first. They didn't have the logo. Black Sabbath never had a logo. The logo changes. I don't know, you could get different Black Sabbath t-shirts of every album. There's only kind of Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath, which has sort of got a bit of what you call a Sabbath logo. Thin Lizzy had a cool logo, but then they switched it when it went to the Johnny Fox album and Bad Reputation and Black Rose. They never came back to that logo till later. Judas Priest had, their kind of more gothic logo. Then there was the cool symmetrical one, but it took a while to get to that. Scorpions, they had a logo pretty much from 75 and they stuck with that. But Maiden, there was never a point where that logo wasn't used. And it's pretty amazing, actually, when you look at the Power Slow Come Somewhere in Time, where they break from the thing across the top, which when they came back with Bruce, actually one of the first things they did was put that logo across the top, although they had changed it slightly, I think. But, I'm just rabbiting on here. But Final Things album was recorded at Battery Studios in London between January and Feb 82. It was recorded and mixed in 5 weeks. I think the production by Martin Birch, it's that classic thing he does. He literally records the band, gets the sounds, and there's not really much going on. I've noticed a few things. I don't record to a click Maiden. There's a few bits where the tempos kind of go a bit out. I noticed on 22 Acacia Avenue, when it cuts back into the pedalling, the second time you can hear it kind of slow down. It almost kind of slightly trips on itself, which is, well, to me it does that. It was quite interesting. But we could talk more about this album, but obviously there's a full classic albums on it as well. But Number of the Beast, 40 years old today, Maiden, classic. Cheers, thanks.